It was a cold, windy afternoon when a group of cops approached a frail, homeless old woman sitting on the sidewalk. Her clothes were ragged, and her face was weathered by years of struggle. To them, she was just another forgotten soul in the city, an easy target for harassment. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. This woman, though broken in appearance, was once the deadliest sniper the US military had ever known. She wasn't just any Green Beret, she was a legend, an elite marksman whose kills in the field were so precise that they were whispered about in military circles for decades. But now, she was a shadow of her former self, living on the streets, her past buried deep beneath layers of time and trauma. As the officers taunted her, she said nothing, her eyes cold and unreadable. What they didn't realize was that this woman had taken down targets with more precision and skill than they could ever imagine. She had been trained to survive, to endure, to fight when needed, and to disappear when not. But would she snap back into that persona when pushed too far? Or had time truly worn her down? The officers' actions were about to take an unexpected turn, and they had no idea just how badly they were about to regret it. As the officers stood over her, their voices growing louder, the old woman remained eerily still. Her hands, shaking from age and the cold, gripped the cardboard she'd been using as a makeshift blanket. She didn't flinch when one of the officers tried to yank it away. She simply stared at the pavement, her mind clearly far away from the chaos unfolding around her. Years ago, this woman had been a part of something much bigger, much darker. She had trained in the toughest environments, undergone missions no one else would even dare attempt. Her skills were so sharp, so deadly, that she had earned the respect and fear of even the most seasoned soldiers. But those days were long behind her. The brutal missions, the bloodshed had taken their toll. After a certain point, it wasn't just the physical wounds that mattered, it was the emotional scars that lingered, buried deep within. Somewhere along the way, she had vanished from the world, choosing to disappear from everything she once knew. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was something else. She had no family left, no friends to speak of, just her, the cold, and the streets. But there was something in her eyes now, something flickering, like the remnants of a fire long forgotten. The cops, unaware of the storm brewing within her, continued their taunting. What they didn't realize was that this old woman wasn't nearly as helpless as they thought, and soon they would learn the hard way. As the officers exchanged crude jokes and laughed amongst themselves, one of them, a young rookie named Officer Turner, took a step closer. He was trying to prove himself to the others, eager to show that he wasn't afraid to handle troublemakers. His hands hovered near his belt, where his taser was holstered. His eyes were full of arrogance, and he seemed oblivious to the woman's calm, almost unsettling composure. Turner squatted down in front of her, blocking her view of the street. "Hey, lady, you don't belong here," he sneered, looking her up and down as if she was some kind of nuisance to be dealt with. The others watched in silence, some bored, some amused, but none of them understood the depth of the situation. The old woman's lips barely moved as she spoke. "You don't know who I am," she said, her voice raspy, though with a sharpness that caught Turner off guard. For a brief moment, his confidence faltered. He didn't expect such resistance from someone so frail. He leaned in closer, still trying to assert dominance. "I don't care who you were, old lady. You're nothing now, just another bad lady on the street." Her eyes locked onto his. It wasn't a glance of fear. It was something far colder, something calculated, something that spoke of years spent in life-or-death situations. Turner didn't see it, but the others started to feel the tension in the air, a slow, creeping unease that they couldn't shake. At that moment, a small, subtle movement came from her hands. She hadn't lifted them, but her fingers twitched, almost imperceptibly, as though preparing for something. The air around them grew thick with unspoken history, the memories of military operations in far-off lands, of being surrounded by enemies, of knowing how to survive under the most brutal of circumstances. A car drove by, its engine revving loudly, cutting through the uneasy silence. But in the woman's eyes, it was as though the world around her had slowed down. She wasn't just a homeless woman anymore. She was a soldier once again, and every fiber of her being was alert to the situation at hand. Turner took another step toward her, not realizing that every move he made was inching him closer to the edge of a precipice. The others were starting to get uncomfortable, but none of them moved. They didn't understand the weight of the moment. They had no idea what she was capable of. And just as Turner opened his mouth to make another snide remark, the woman's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. It wasn't a smile of warmth. It wasn't kind. It was something darker, something that spoke of lessons learned the hard way. Something was about to snap, and they had no idea. The air was thick now, charged with something that none of the officers could place, but all of them could feel. The laughter had died down, and the sound of the busy street had faded into a distant hum. For a moment, it was as if time itself had frozen. Only the woman's steady breathing and the occasional shuffle of her worn shoes on the pavement broke the silence. Turner's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered, his bravado returning. "What, you gonna threaten me now, old lady?" he taunted, his voice now tinged with uncertainty. His hand lingered closer to his taser, fingers twitching with nervous energy. He didn't know why, but something about her presence unnerved him, like standing on the edge of a cliff without realizing it. Her gaze never wavered. The cold, unblinking stare felt like it was piercing through him. The tension in the air grew thicker, each second stretching longer than the last. Turner's heart began to race, though he refused to show it. But the feeling gnawing at him was undeniable. He didn't know what it was, just that something had shifted, something was coming, and he was unprepared. One of the other officers, a seasoned veteran named Sergeant Harass, noticed the change too. He took a step back, subtly scanning the street, looking for something, anything, that might explain the unease in the air. His instincts told him to keep an eye on her, but he didn't want to appear weak in front of the rookies. "She's just a homeless woman," Harass muttered under his breath, trying to shake off the feeling, but even his voice trembled with doubt. Turner, however, wasn't backing down. He took another step forward, his chest puffed out with bravado. "Get up," he barked, reaching out to grab her by the arm. "You're causing a disturbance." As his fingers brushed her sleeve, something inside her shifted. Her eyes narrowed, and in that brief instant, Turner saw something he wasn't prepared for. It was a flash of absolute clarity. A look that said, "Asterisk, I've been here before, and I know exactly what to do, asterisk." Before Turner could react, her hand shot out, faster than he could process. Her fingers closed around his wrist with an iron grip, and in the next moment, he found himself frozen, as if trapped in a vice. The world seemed to move in slow motion, and his mind raced to catch up. He tried to pull away, but it was like trying to break free from steel. Her strength, unexpected and overwhelming, left him breathless. The other officers scrambled, unsure of what to do. Harass opened his mouth to yell, but nothing came out. There was something terrifyingly precise about the way she moved. It wasn't chaotic, it wasn't desperate, it was controlled, it was calculated. Turner's voice faltered, a shaky laugh escaping his lips. "What the hell?" But before he could finish, she twisted his wrist, forcing him to drop to his knees, his taser slipping from his belt. He barely had time to register the pain before the world around him spun into confusion. He tried to push her away, but her hands remained locked on him, guiding his every move with a precision that felt unnatural. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the entire world had gone silent. The other officers, caught between hesitation and instinct, stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. And in that split second, the woman's lips parted again, but this time, the words came with a cold, unsettling calm. "You should have never underestimated me." The rookie, now trapped and vulnerable, felt the weight of those words settle over him like a blanket of dread, and he realized, too late, that the nightmare he had unwittingly walked into was just beginning. The silence hung thick in the air, heavy with the tension of the moment. Turner, still kneeling before the woman, could feel his heart pounding against his ribs, each beat a reminder that he was no longer in control. His wrist throbbed, a burning pain creeping up his arm, and yet it was the fear that gripped him most, a fear he hadn't experienced in years, if ever. He had been trained to handle threats, to assert his authority with confidence. But this wasn't just a threat. This was something far more dangerous. The other officers began to stir, their confusion now mixing with something darker, fear. Harass, the seasoned sergeant, took a step forward, his eyes locked on the woman's face, searching for some sign of weakness. But there was none. She remained still, her expression unreadable, as if she had already anticipated every move they might make. Then, out of nowhere, a voice cut through the silence, a voice that no one had expected. "Let him go." It wasn't the rookie, still trapped and gasping for air. It wasn't Harass, who had taken a cautious step back. No, the voice came from someone entirely different, a man standing just outside the circle, his figure cloaked in shadow. The officers turned as one, their hands instinctively going to their weapons, but the man didn't flinch. His presence alone was commanding, and his eyes, sharp, calculating, seemed to size up each of them in a single glance. "Who the hell are you?" Harass demanded, his voice shaking with both anger and fear. The tension in the air intensified as the newcomer took a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving the woman on the ground. The old woman, for the first time in what felt like hours, shifted her focus to him. Her grip on Turner's wrist relaxed, just enough to give the rookie a brief moment of freedom, but not enough to let him escape. Her lips parted, barely moving as she spoke. "Long time no see, Ron." Ron. The name hung in the air, and suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. There was something familiar in the way the woman said it, something that sent a shiver down Harass' spine. He had seen enough in his career to recognize when something was about to go terribly wrong, and this felt like one of those moments. The newcomer, Ron, didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced down at Turner, still kneeling, disoriented, and now struggling to stand. Then, without a word, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small object, a badge. "I'm here on business," Ron said, his voice cold, almost detached. "But it's not the kind of business you want to get involved with." Harass, already on edge, now felt a growing unease deep in his gut. What business could this man possibly have with the woman? And why did she seem to know him? The questions piled up, but before anyone could ask more, Ron spoke again, his eyes narrowing. "You should have left her alone," he warned, his tone serious, dangerous even. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." And with that, the stakes were raised higher than any of them had anticipated. The game had changed, and the players were no longer who they seemed.